information is power.
Yeah.
And what I'll tell you is that the most powerful have access to better information today. I think the disparity of information between the powerful and the everyday person has just grown. Like we always talk about income disparity, and it's a real thing. Totally, I get it. But information disparity, man, it might even be worse.
100%. Even just to go to accredited news sources online now to get information, you have to pay for it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Even to get what used to be just a newspaper. Right?
Yeah.
You have to pay for that information. So whether you even believe it's going to be true or not, to have information that's even kind of sourced, you know, that's put together, that's formatted, that's not done by AI. You're having to pay for that.
Yeah, and I hope that we get back to more of that, man, because that's how it used to be when we were kids, right? Like you'd pay of a newspaper subscription.
Right, I think people decided they couldn't trust the news anymore. I think a lot of that has occurred in the past 10 years for sure. I feel like the news, every time I turn it on, I feel like there's some lobbyist behind it. There's some, you know, I mean, people say big pharma all the time, but we have so many drug ads on our television. It's like, you know, it just I wouldn't be surprised if it's compromised. That's what it feels like.
The news industry is in a tailspin, man. I'll give you my 2 cents for what it's worth, because I've been a journalist now for like 25 years, some insane amount of time. I can't believe that. But when I started as a daily newspaper reporter, like we had a nice big staff, man. Like we had librarians on staff, we had researchers on staff, you know, we had photographers, a sports desk, a business desk, you know, and I think, I don't know, man, was it like there's like a third as many journalists as there used to be, right? Like if there's fewer people doing anything, it's going to be a shittier job. You're going to get a crappier product, right? And so, and the trend line that gutted journalism wasn't initially that, because I totally agree. All the stats say what you're saying. People don't trust the news like they used to. But it wasn't, the trend line wasn't that people stopped subscribing. What happened is that newspapers used to make huge profits from things like classified ads, right? Like, we used to read the classified ads in the back, right?
See, like if you could meet a woman or even adopt a pet.
Get a new BMX bike or like a dirt bike, like a new car. Like it was all back there, right? And that stuff, man, that subsidized the journalists. And so, of course, that went away. And that was like a lion's share of the profits, right?
Craigslist kind of killed that in a way.
Totally. And it's fine. Technology is going to do, and like the newspapers didn't react in time. You know, they lost this big thing. And so like you just started seeing the industry shrinking. And now the layoffs in the last 2 years have just been like brutal. But the problem there is, man, is like I could quit journalism and I could go become a private researcher doing the exact same thing I'm doing now as an investigative journalist. But instead of giving it to the public, I would be giving it to hedge funds. I'd be giving it to super wealthy people that would literally, I'm not shitting you, would pay me 4 to 5 times what I'm getting paid now, right? And that's actually what's happening, right? And so like you have the public who is increasingly just getting not as good much information, especially if you're in like a local news market, right? Like you're not getting information. People aren't paying for it. There are fewer journalists, and then the wealthiest are paying for it still, and they're getting incredibly in-depth information.
Right, and now you're starting to see privatized spaces have the journalists almost on their side, working for them to give them information that better helps them to market to the everyday person.
Yeah, and I wouldn't call that person a journalist, but that same like deep research or investigative project,
right?
Especially in tech, man.
Ooh. Well, I think it's like, you know, they had, even if you look at the case of the opioid epidemic, right?
Yeah.
And there was a documentary, there was a television show, I can't remember the name of it.
All the Beauty and the Bloodshed was a doc that came out that looked super deep at the opioid, or I can't remember. Alex Gibney, maybe on HBO, looked at the opioid epidemic too.
This one had Michael Keaton.
Okay.
You know, is that a real person?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know Hollywood, so I don't know actors, and I don't know the space as well, but yeah.
Yeah, they had this, there you go, Dope Sick. They had this series came out, it's unbelievable. It's how the opioid companies basically hired people that had been working on the Food and Drug Administration to come and work for them so they could work the loopholes.
Totally. I'll just tell you my 2 cents. The reason that we often know stories like this, like how FDA former employees were then going, is because a journalist went in and dug it out and published it, right? Like these types of fictionalized versions get written off of like hard work of investigative journalists. And there are fewer and fewer people pulling out stories like this. And I'll tell you, man, as a journalist, like my problem 20 years ago was that I was always worried that some other journalist was going to scoop the story and get it before me. Today, my problem is that people are coming to me with important stories and I don't have the time to work on them because I'm already working on something and I don't even have another journalist I can tell them to go to, right? Like we're just not getting out as many important stories like that as we used to because there's just fewer of us. Like And there are more people working for the lobbyists. There are more people working for the PR firms that are spinning stuff. And so we're getting into this really imbalanced place of information. And
it's a dark time. And that's why conspiracy theories rise.
I totally agree.
Because it's like, well, people are going by their gut. People are looking to fill a void.
Yep.
And people want some truth. I think if you don't have truth, you can feel it.
Yeah, I think so. And I always say, and this is the other thing, man, is for me, journalism, it's okay. So like take a football, right? Like the surface of a football is imperfect, right? It's why a quarterback spirals the ball. Because if you throw the football without spiraling it, because the surface of the football is
fancy, yeah,
it's like imperfect. It just flops around,
yeah.
But you spiral it, and all of those imperfections get smoothed out. And journalism is the same way. Like no journalist is the voice of God, but when you've got 10 journalists covering the same thing, you're going to get as close to the obtainable version of the truth as possible because you have 10 different people that are competing to get it out. They're gonna check each other. They're gonna point out if somebody else misses something or screws something up, and you get at the closest possible obtainable version of the truth. Now, when you just have one person, it's like a football that's not spiraling anymore.
Right.
It just gets totally off kilter, and I think we're getting closer to that. And I think that's like in a democracy when we're supposed to be an informed group of people that are going to go to the ballot box and vote. It's a problem. If we were in China, it wouldn't matter because the government's going to tell us what to do anyway. But in a country where we're like, no, we need to be informed so we can go to vote, that becomes a problem.